a couple more people will join us. And um, so it's been a while since I've done this, so I'm feeling a little off balance, but welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I'm really happy that Lindsay and Keith at the ALS Association in San Diego reached out to me to prepare something to talk about for you folks today. I was given the general topic of assistive technology, or AAC, and it's a huge, really range of possible things to talk about. So I'm sharing with you my screen now, and it has a PowerPoint slide deck with, wow, too many slides to go through in a very slow and methodical way. I'm probably going to speak too quickly during some of it, but I'll be happy to hear from you. Feel free to try to interrupt me if you need me to clarify or repeat something. And you can definitely reach out to me by email or phone or text at the numbers here on the screen afterwards. I'll be happy to be a resource to you. I work for a company called Augment. Let me try that again. I work for a company called Talk to Me Technologies. And in the world of AT, or assistive technology, we provide communication solutions for people who have difficulty talking. So a lot of the folks I work with who are adults who have ALS look at our systems, but chiefly a few that I'll show you in a little while. AT, or assistive technology, is a huge topic, as I mentioned. So I'll try to cover a few things across the range, and then specifically about speech devices, that it's near and dear to what I do. Talk to Me Technologies itself as a company has been around for 15 years now. We're based in Iowa, Cedar Falls, Iowa, beautiful corn country. And I work as a communication consultant for Talk to Me Technologies here in Southern California, and I live right here in Rancho Bernardo. I have about 25 years of experience in the world of assistive technology, about 20 specifically in the realm of augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC. Which is all about speech devices and the way folks can use them to communicate. I worked for 8 years for a company called Dynavox that a few years ago was acquired by Tobii, the Swedish company. So now they're called Tobii Dynavox. I worked for 13 years or so at evaluation centers, about 10 years at evaluation centers in Northern California and Southern California. And now I've worked for 5 years for Talk to Me. So I'm at that point in my career where I've got many years of experience, some of them still valid, or some of that experience is still valid, but the technology industries have changed so much, even in the last 5, that there's always something new to learn and new developments coming out that are really exciting. Today, I'll try to cover a few things listed on this slide to the left, including computer access, speech recognition, voice enhancement and extension, AAC, or augmented communication devices, tablets versus speech generating devices, AAC access methods, voice banking and message banking, Talk to Me Technologies devices and services for sure, and then hopefully have a little time for discussing some typical kinds of scenarios that people with ALS experience, and questions and answers. There are several things I won't be able to cover, partly because of time, partly because they're not areas that I have a lot of experience in or can give you much to go on. There are lots of resources available thanks to the World Wide Web that may be of value to you. If we jump right into it, computer access is a whole area that we tend to touch with the speech devices we use today, because our speech devices, the high-tech devices, are actually computers. But folks experiencing a need to find a different way to use their computer, say because the keyboard is hard to operate without accidentally hitting keys, or the mouse is too touchy and difficult to move and select accurately, there are alternatives to make that easier. This world of computer access kind of started back in the mid-90s with Apple Computer as having a dedicated department at the company that was involved with looking at alternative access for people with disabilities. Um, and so it's been interesting to be involved with this whole world, to be a part of that experience early on. When you can think about it, computer access is how to move a mouse or a mouse cursor, a mouse controller on the screen to select things, and how to input text. And when it comes to changing or using a different kind of keyboard for a person who has difficulty using a typical keyboard, there are small compact keyboards. There are key guards or overlays that can be put over the top of the keys to keep you from accidentally touching or pressing the keys. On-screen keyboards can be really helpful with an alternative mouse to type using the on-screen keyboard that you're used to, probably on your phone or an iPad. And then alternative mouse controllers specifically. On the screen here, I've got a picture of a small trackpad, much like the ones you see on laptops, but it could be put somewhere else, say on your lap, on your leg, if you can't reach the one on your laptop. There's one that looks like a a headset, but it's actually a head tracking mouse system that you wear. And if you turn your head left and right, that sends the mouse commands to the computer to move the cursor on the screen left and right and up and down the same way. And that what looks like a headset microphone is actually a little pressure sensitive switch, so you can puff at it to make mouse clicks. So using one of these mouse controllers or some of the others like this trackballs that you see, you can select things on an on-screen keyboard, just the way you would with a regular mouse. Add-on eye tracking cameras have been coming and going these days. There are several positives that they're fairly inexpensive, and some negatives that they can be limited in the way they work with your software. And all of these kinds of gizmos are sort of a do-it-yourself thing. There are a few resources around town we'll talk about later to get some of these things in your hands to try them out. And some of them we might use with speech devices that I'll talk about later. The main thing is that computer access is very user-oriented or personalized to fit your specific needs. And there's so much to choose from. It's great to find a place that can help you consider your options. And San Diego has an Assistive Technology Center that I'll refer to later that has a lab with all of these for you to experience and try them out. So hopefully as this pandemic gets a little bit better under control, we'll be able to go visit them there. Now with telephone and tablet access, because we're all using touchscreen phones and tablets like iPads and Android tablets these days, it's a little bit more of a Wild West or less charted area. Your phone is a mini computer. The Android platform has some accessibility, and iPads and iPhones have their own set of built-in accessibility settings and so forth. Nowadays, we're starting to see some ability to plug in a mouse to either Android or iPhone, iOS devices, but it's still a little bit dicey about whether that will work inside the programs you're using. So this is a part of the world of assistive technology to keep an eye on, because things keep changing and improving pretty quickly.
Wow, yeah, I didn't realize that there was mouse capabilities on an iPhone or iPad. That's kind of a new territory, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was iOS 11 or iOS 12. They added some capability, and then iOS 13 added some more. But if you experience an iOS device through those kinds of version changes, they move around the settings. So where it was in one version, it's changed to another location. So figuring that all out can be a little bit of a bugger. But yeah, some really cool options there. I think the one thing about these tablets and phone systems that I'll talk about more later too is that they're a bit limiting in what they can do. There's only so much you can do with them because they're meant to be portable, lightweight, small, and not take a lot of battery power. Whereas a a real computer system can do a lot more for you, with the drawback of it being heavier, bigger, and not so portable. Um, Now, when it comes to alternative text entry, I talked about using keyboards and mouse alternatives and on-screen keyboards, but a whole another area that I can only talk about briefly is using speech recognition, where your phone or your computer actually recognizes what you say when you speak in a somewhat natural way to it. Um, 15 years ago, speech recognition was very expensive and actually difficult. You had to spend hours teaching the system every discrete word you speak. Nowadays, if you've experienced it on your phone, you can just tap on the microphone, speak what you want, and it'll write out that text. There's still some comical errors that occur, but it's phenomenal what can be done pretty quickly. The secret is a lot of that speech recognition, especially on our portable devices, is using your internet connection to get a supercomputer in the cloud to do all that processing for you. So when your phone is disconnected from the network or disconnected from Wi-Fi, you may have limited capability to use that speech recognition function. With the exception of things like Hey Siri, where you can say, Hey Siri, what's on my calendar? And it'll speak back to you what's on your calendar. You don't have a lot of control over your phone or a tablet to do things like, Hey Siri, Google Thai restaurants in my area. And it won't show you necessarily Thai restaurants and so forth. You can use a system like Dragon Home on Windows to say, wake up, and it'll start listening to you. And start Chrome. Go to Google, search Thai restaurants, and select first link, or select Thai basil in Rancho Bernardo, and it'll then select that link for you. That voice command feature that's part of Dragon Home and a couple other competing products can do everything that you would usually use your hands and a mouse and a keyboard to do. It does take a regimented way of talking to your computer so that it understands it as a command instead of speech that you're typing into something. So it can be quite a challenging process to learn how to do. There are a couple of consultants in Southern California that specialize in teaching folks how to use speech recognition, not only to dictate text, but also to control their computer. Probably the most successful at it are professional dictators. I mean, not Mussolini or folks like that, but folks who dictate a lot, like lawyers and doctors. I always like that. I think that's kind of funny, professional dictators. It's a little expensive and it's an add-on, but it is something that can be really useful. I mention it because a lot of folks with ALS who are first experiencing difficulty using their hands want to use this to stay connected and do things on their computer, so it makes sense. But if you're already if you are developing difficulty in speaking, this may be of limited value to you and can kind of stress out your voice and sort of increase that speech impairment prematurely. Now, when it comes to enhancing the voice that you're working with, there are lots of options. Voice amplifiers are probably one of the best things to help you still speak clearly, but not require that you push with your breath as much to speak. Of course, amplifiers amplify all the noise around you, so they can work really well in some situations and not so well in others. Probably one of the bigger things to consider is whether an amplifier has a headset mic that holds the microphone right where it needs to be in front of your mouth, or if you can get away with using a collar mic or even a transdermal mic. In this picture in the lower left corner, the silver mannequin has a transdermal mic attached to their neck, and it actually picks up the sound from their voice box, and it can take away a little of that problem with extraneous noise picking up their voice. But for some people, it has to press fairly firmly against their larynx, and that can be uncomfortable. So a voice amplifier can make a huge difference to help you continue to be able to be heard and communicate throughout the day. When without it, it's very tiring to speak and project. Uh, smart speaker systems in your home have become sort of this great, fantastic thing people like to be able to put things on their shopping list, find out what the weather's going to be like, do all kinds of things that they ask Alexa or Google Home to do. And some of these are now pretty well set up to be integrated with speech generating devices. So if you used to say, Alexa, turn on the hallway lights, you could have your speech device teach Alexa to understand it in a matter of 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And then you can have on your speech device a phrase to say the same thing. Alexa, turn on the hallway lights, and it'll do it. Or do anything else that you have set up as recipes or skills for Alexa to learn.
Yeah, I've seen some families before where they have a whole category of just for Alexa commands. And then, if they've lost their voice, and then be able to use, select those to be able to use their, Alexa or their Google or whatnot. Yeah,
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah, it's terrific. It's been fun to watch that. At first, it was pretty comical as new technology can be, but it can be so fun to see how immediately upon setting up the system and training it, um, a speech device can do the same thing that everybody in the house using their voice can do. It's yeah, it's one of those funnest parts of setting up a system. Now, talking about AAC specifically, really my wheelhouse these days. AAC stands for augmentative or alternative communication. Now, speech devices or speech generating devices is a term that has been sort of coined by a working group of speech therapists or speech pathologists back in around 1999, 2000, when they advised Medicare on covering speech devices. So we throw these terms around interchangeably in our realm, but when I'm talking with folks who are not familiar, I try to use the term speech generating devices. It can be augmentative and alternative communication is really a range of things, from light tech communication boards or recorded message playback systems, voice amplifiers like on the screen here, to your smartphone, and even dedicated augmentative and alternative communication devices. There's really no right choice or specific thing that's best for one person. Honestly, when people ask me, well, which should I get? I say, you know what, when I'm communicating with my wife face to face, I talk, but I can just make a facial expression and she can understand me. When we're across the room, I can use a facial expression or a gesture when it's too loud for her to hear me. We can text, we could email, we could call each other on the phone. We don't use a single way to communicate. And so when looking at communication, when you're having difficulty speaking, one device or one strategy might be your primary for a lot of reasons, but don't feel like you need to do everything with it. It's actually best to have a range of them. So if we start thinking about low-tech AAC devices, that's things that don't require batteries and power to run them. They could be communication boards or communication booklets with words and phrases on single pages, and on another page, an alphabet board that you might use with a communication partner to help spell out messages. Or things like the boogie board where you can scribble with your handwrite things to say. They're often sometimes quicker to get going and use than a battery powered device that may need to be turned on and started up and positioned. And they do, as I mentioned, work best when you have a smart partner. Somebody can read your handwriting or can look at the letters that you're pointing to and then understand what you're spelling out. Now, high-tech devices, on the other hand of the spectrum, are your electronic things like your smartphones and tablets and purpose-built augmentative and alternative communication or speech generating devices. Purpose-built because they're meant to be used by a person with a speech and language disability, and can be covered through insurance because they're a durable medical equipment device. Now, what probably the biggest thing that I see is a huge value of a purpose-built high-tech AAC device versus a light-tech system like a communication board is that it can allow the person using the speech device to be completely independent and communicate or say exactly what they want to say, even when the person they're trying to communicate with is not looking at them or not looking at their screen, or maybe actually ignoring or not even aware of what's going on. A person using a speech device can get somebody's attention because it speaks out loud or makes a sound to get somebody's attention, and can talk to somebody who's not looking or able to look at the screen. And they can talk on the telephone or even send and receive text or email. So they're very powerful in what they can provide as independent communication. Now, when it comes to thinking about, well, should I, if I have a speech disability, should I get a tablet or should I look at a speech sharing device? There are lots of pros and cons to either one. Now, tablets by themselves, either an iOS, an Apple iPad, or an Android tablet of any kind, there are many to choose from. They're fairly inexpensive, but they are sort of a DIY, you're on your own kind of system. They're generally kind of fragile, and they're meant for the wide population of consumers. Consumer products go, to get one that's rugged and durable, it's going to cost you a lot more. They are, generally speaking, limited to touch access on a touch screen. Though, as I mentioned before, they're now starting to have alternative access methods built in, the ability to plug in a mouse. They usually have a limited warranty and service for repair, where you're on your own to take care of anything that happens. But on the other side, you can get as many as you want. They're not necessarily very expensive. But on the other hand, for a really good one that's going to last you a while, they can be fairly expensive, and they're not covered by medical insurance. Medical insurance, by and large, does not want to purchase a system for somebody that anybody else could use. Durable medical equipment by its nature has to be prescribed by a doctor, and it should have limited capabilities for somebody that's not prescribed for it. Speech generating devices, though they may be based on consumer tablets and computers, have been packaged and put together specifically to be dedicated to communication, and that's why they can be covered by medical insurance. They are usually backed by a company that has a lot of experience in serving folks with speech impairments and knows how to work with them to provide the best options and capabilities for them. They're, by and large, the high-tech AAC devices also can be controlled by many different access methods besides just a touch screen. We provide extensive warranty service after the device is delivered for all kinds of issues that come up. So there's quite a lot that you get with a system that's a speech generating device that's purpose built. I think it's part of the reason they cost a bit more. Now, I've been talking a little bit about access methods. I've touched a little bit on computer access, alternatives to the keyboard and mouse. And there's quite a range of alternative access methods available for speech generating devices, including different types of styluses. But did you want to say something, Lindsay?
Yeah, I was just not sorry to interrupt. I just had a quick question based on the last slide.
Sure.
If you can go back to
Let me
that.
see if I can go back. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Just a question would be, and just because of knowing some of our families and what they're asking too, is if someone's in a position where they have a tablet, they're looking to get a speech generating device maybe in the future, or that process is kind of at the early stages. Is there anything you'd recommend for how to kind of make it an easy transition from one to the other? Or are there any apps that kind of make that switch a little easier, like a text to speech app or anything like that?
Well, yeah, there are several really good text to speech apps. We're used to getting apps for free on our phones and tablets. Free doesn't really cut it very well with many of them. I find that they're pretty limited. Either the speech doesn't sound that great, or the way the apps work is a little awkward compared to what I'm used to with speech sharing device software that's really well refined. But I have to acknowledge that I have that bias. I find that the products we have created just do so much a better job to comprehensively helping a person out. An app on an iPad or a similar tablet can be just fine for a lot of the kinds of communication you need to have if you don't need a lot of extra stuff. Probably one of the best that makes that transition from, say, an iPad to a speech device, a Windows speech device, would be one called Grid. It's made by a company called Smartbox in the UK. And what's fantastic is you can customize and have a communication system of stored phrases and in certain topics, and a keyboard with word prediction and word completion, and a lot of those things that make the app easy to use to communicate. You can have all that customized on the tablet while you use it, and then a copy of that configuration can be put on a speech device running Grid 3, which is a companion program. So it makes for a very seamless transition. What you've learned to communicate with can then be moved over to another product that works just the same way, but then you can use head tracking or eye tracking to control it. So it's a fantastic way to go. The Grid program comes through the App Store as a subscription or as a outright purchase. Obviously, the subscription is much cheaper if you're only going to, in a sense, rent it month to month. It may be difficult to consider plunking down $300 to $400 for purchasing it outright, but that then certainly seals you into being able to use it past the difference that that break-even point between renting or monthly payments and the full price.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks for that question. I think Grid is probably the only one right now that allows for that transfer or transition.
Okay.
And this is May 13th, 2021. So that may change tomorrow. And what
Yeah.
I just said is no longer true.
Yeah.
So this area of access, I found is really critical to keeping the system working for somebody who has started with maybe a touchscreen system and is having difficulty using their hands or their fingers to select things on the screen. So sometimes just adding a specialized stylus, maybe with a cuff to hold it in your hand, can then allow you to still directly select on the touchscreen with that stylus. In the upper left corner, there's some interesting colored tubes. It says those are actually pieces of foam that an occupational therapist or a hand therapist might know about to put on the stylus to make them easier to grip. A thumb trackball can be very useful if you can hold it in your hand to move the cursor if using a regular mouse is difficult. Ability switches like this red button switch can be paired with other software on the system to then go through choices on the screen, and all you have to do is hit the switch, either with your finger or wiggle a part of your body to trigger that switch to activate it. There are different kinds of head pointers and that I've seen folks use. There's a gentleman here in Escondido who uses a head pointer with his communication device. He actually grew up with cerebral palsy, and it wasn't until he was in junior high that his school actually allowed him to use a head pointer on a regular typewriter. This is back in the early 70s. And he demonstrated that he could use that to communicate when they were all really resistant to it. And he uses a head stick to paint, and he's quite an accomplished painter using the same system. So having that headband fit him properly is probably the most challenging part of it for him. Some folks will use a laser pointer on their glasses, or even held on a cuff in their hand to point to things around like a poster on the wall with words and phrases and so forth. I've got a one picture here of a speech device with a little silver thing on the top, which is a camera that can watch your head movement, called a head mouse. And a really big trackball that is big and yellow. That trackball is the size of a grapefruit. And there's a fairly well-known gentleman with ALS, Augie Nieto, who lives here in Orange County and has been using that kind of trackball system for years. He is the only movement I know he has when he used this device was with his foot. So he would actually move the trackball with his foot on a footrest. And then upper right corner, there's two switches on a black pad. Those are actually about 2 inches square, each of them, and it's a Bluetooth switch system. So many switches that you plug into a communication device could be wireless or Bluetooth, like that one. All of this is kind of like looking at computer access in general. There's a big question of where to start, and that's where you want to reach out to folks who know about these kinds of alternative access methods when you decide you might need them. And the folks at the San Diego Assistive Technology Center here in San Diego, it's a United Cerebral Palsy program, has that lab that has a ton of this kind of equipment for you to try out, and then also an assistive technology lending library that you can borrow it from too. So even though you might start with a communication device where you're using touchscreen access, if you've chosen well, you've chosen one which can be changed or used through alternative methods when and if you need them in the future. Now, let's see if I can advance my slide here. You know, a whole other area of speech generating devices that I get asked about a lot is about voice banking and message banking. From this point in this presentation, I've been talking about ways to control the device, how to put input. But when that voice comes out, it can sound pretty odd because it's not the voice that you are accustomed to and your listeners are. So voice banking and message banking are two options that help that system sound a lot like you. There are two different kinds of, as I mentioned, voice banking is all about creating a speech synthesizer that sounds like your natural speaking voice. It involves training the system by reading many phrases or words given to you by the training system, and it records those utterances you make and then creates a synthesizer. It's a program that then forms words that you've typed in a voice that sounds a lot like yours. So you could imagine typing anything on a communication device with your voice banked on it, and then it would speak out instead of in a synthetic voice in one that sounds like you. Of course, there are a couple limitations, but what you need to get started is usually a laptop or a desktop computer running Windows for the most part, an external microphone or headset like the one I'm wearing. Usually you need an internet connection because some of the processing of all this recording work happens through a computer somewhere else in the country, and a quiet place with not much background noise, especially leaf blowers, dogs and cats and kids, all that stuff that kind of seeps into our lives without us realizing it until you get a power outage or something. And time, best time of day for you to speak or record clearly while your voice is clear, things like that. Now, voice banking is a product that is usually not covered by insurance because it's considered a luxury, though boy, it really is the essence of who we are sometimes, is the sound of our voice. There are several different companies I've listed here. Honestly, these prices are about 6 months old, so I don't have a lot of confidence that they're particularly accurate at the moment. It's difficult to say if one is really better than another, because I've talked to folks who've tried one and they liked it. I've also talked to others who didn't like the sound of that voice, but they didn't necessarily try another. There are new kids on the block like the Voice Keeper that have an interesting set up where you can record just as little as about 3 minutes of your voice and then create a synthesizer on it. And coworker of mine has looked into this whole lot, and they actually have an app you can put on your smartphone, and you can record right on your smartphone. And if you do those 3 minutes and you're not too happy with the voice that you hear, you can record a few more minutes and see how that sounds. And the more you invest in it, generally, the better the quality of the voice that's produced. You get to hear what that sounds like and add to it before you commit to that $300 to pay for it. So it is one of the less expensive ones, and boy, it seems to be really igniting a lot of interest because of that capability to try it out, add some more to it, and hear how that sounds. I think a cappella is one where you can do two things. You can do voice banking, but also double dip and do message banking that I'll talk about in a minute, and combine those two to create a voice that sounds more like you. Model Talker, the one in the middle of this list, that is not very expensive, but does require a whole lot of training time. Team Gleason, Steve Gleason's foundation, has been pretty forthcoming with assistance with people getting that fee covered. I think they're also now covering a cappella, but I'm not positive about that as well. Lindsay, do you know?
I believe they do. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure they do both Model Talker and acapella. Yeah.
Cool. Acapella has been big for many years as a speech synthesizer company. I think they're based in the UK or the European Union. Acapella Group was actually a consortium of smaller companies that came together about 12, 15 years ago. Now, go ahead.
Sorry, on the last slide with the list, is acapella, from your knowledge, the only one that does both voice and message banking?
Yeah, this idea of double dipping, I believe that's true. Just acapella at the moment.
Okay, that's good to know.
Now, the company called Vocal ID that's listed here twice, they have an interesting one where you can have you can actually shop for a voice that's would sound much like you based on a short, simple recording of 3 seconds of your own vocalization. They don't have to be real words, but just the sound of your instrument making noise, and then they can find in their archive or in their portfolio a voice that sounds really a lot like you. Personally, I haven't experienced how that actually works to tell you more about it. Yeah, but it's just one of their selling points.
It's really cool.
Now, where do you want to start? Since there's so many different options, you want to first look at getting a headset. Figure out if you have a specific speech device that you may be looking at getting. You want to make sure that whichever voice banking option you choose would be supported. Happily these days, many of them are covered. Many of the main ones, Model Talker, VoiceKeeper, Acapella, I think are supported by most of the speech device companies. I think it's really important embarking on this that you work with a speech language pathologist or SLP as well. You may have no trouble really with your voice at the moment, but when you start using your voice in this new way to train a system to record it, you want to make sure that you have the best starting point, that you know how to support your voice and speak really clearly, work with your breathing and diction to have the best quality sound, and also so you don't strain your voice. Folks who are tend to use one part of their body for one thing over and over again and invite repetitive strain. And the same is true of people who talk a lot. Professional speakers usually have vocal coaches to help keep them talking well. Governor Gavin Newsom, I think, is one of those public figures you can tell could really benefit from a vocal coach because he's constantly losing his voice. This last year, it's been hard to listen to him in his daily or weekly briefings on the pandemic because he's just trying so hard to keep from completely losing his voice. Politics aside, he needs a little help there. If I might be so bold to talk outside of my area expertise, for sure. Last thing we want to do is have you injure your voice at a time when you need it most. Now, message banking is a little different, and it's easy to get the two mixed up because they're banking, voice banking versus message banking. But if you think about messages, it's all about recorded messages like on a message machine, a phone message machine. Um, those are recordings of you saying the things you usually say. So, you know, I'm known for a few things around the house here. Like when my kid says something that's just completely outlandish, I'll say, "Are you serious?" Or "Get out of town," or "Close the front door," or something more colorful. Those recordings of me saying those things can then be put onto a device, and I can press a button that has that phrase listed on it, and it'll play back that message, that recording. Um, those recordings can really convey more the essence of your communication and your personality and what you're really trying to deliver in the way you say it. Voice banked synthesizers will always sound fairly flat. And I say always because, at least until now, they do sound fairly flat. There's not a lot of tone control or intonation in a synthesizer voice. So it may sound like you, but a synthesized voice based on your voice won't have that intonation and all that stuff that we just naturally do with the way we talk. So it's nice to have a system that will do both. Speak anything you type, but then also speak in your voice those messages that you always say a certain way with that certain kind of intonation and meaning. So to get started with message banking, it's good to get a high quality recorder like this Zoom H1 that's been around for a few years, where you can just record anytime you're inspired to say, "Oh, I should record that." Press the record button and then say what you want to say, and then it'll create message recording files. There are several recording apps that you can use on your phone instead if you don't want to carry around a recorder as well. Now, what's next is you need to transfer those files from this recorder onto a platform so that you can then put them on a speech device. Now, there's a website called mymessagebanking.com that happens to be hosted by Toby Dynavox, but it's meant to be fairly brand agnostic. It allows you to upload all those recorded messages with whatever their file names are. They're usually random numbered file names when they're on a recorder like this. And then in mymessagebanking.com, we'll essentially listen to those messages. It's a computer that does it, and then rewrites or transcribes those messaged words so that you can know what those recordings are without having to create an index of recorded message to the file name. That helps you then categorize them and then download them onto a speech device and put them to work quite quickly.
That's awesome. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. Yeah, even though I work for Talk to Me Technologies, I've had folks upload their messages there, do a quick conversion, and then download them and hand them to us, and then we can put them on their speech device in the categories and with the subject or category tags of their choice. Now, what do you need to get started? Or, sorry, which is better, or what should you do? Honestly, if you can do both, you can make the best of both or take advantage of both options. And when should you start? I say, gosh, start as quickly as you can. There are so many changes that are going to keep coming at you with ALS. What you can do is decide how you're going to handle it all or how you're going to react to it. And if you can do some things proactively that might help you feel a little bit more in control over the situation, that some days you may find it feels like you're completely out of control. So this is something you can do proactively, and it can have a real positive impact long-term for you. Now, if you have lost your voice or you feel like your voice has changed, don't despair. You may still be able to use the system if your voice doesn't sound as good as it used to. Or you can have a friend or a relative be a surrogate or record their voice for you. And I've worked with a couple folks who found that was a really meaningful experience for them and the person that recorded their voice for them. So there are alternative services like Speak Unique and Vocal ID, as I mentioned earlier, who will find in their library a voice that sounds a lot like yours, though that's generally a little bit more expensive.
Bruce, have you ever known anyone who's used like recordings from maybe, like, let's say they just happen to have recordings of their voice, like if they were a speaker, anything that can kind of use that kind of data, even if it's not like, live recording, but kind of more from the past?
Yeah. Several years ago, I remember, I think it was Roger Ebert, or is it Gene Siskel? Siskel and Ebert, the guys on TV who used to do those movie reviews. I think it was Roger Ebert. Ebert had throat cancer and had significant surgery done, and he lost his voice. And the company that was working with him at that time took hours and hours of recordings of him doing his talk on that TV show and on a radio show, and they created a synthesizer based on those samples. That was, at the time, I could just imagine the labor involved of manually listening to all those and chopping them up and transcribing them and so forth. Nowadays, I think Acapella has a way to take batch recorded speech of yours and do that. But I don't know for sure, so I'm not sure I could, I'm not particularly confident. I'm in a position where I want to give you good recommendations, and I feel really bad if I'm not sure. So
Yeah.
I have
I'm
to look
on
into
the
that.
same boat with that one. That's why I was wondering. I feel like I'll hear that that's an option, but not really learn where that information might be. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that
think I'd,
acapella does that.
right. Great questions. Thanks, Lindsay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to take a few minutes here because I work for Talk to Me Technologies to tell you a little bit about our products. Now, our products, in some ways, are a lot like the others. But when people ask, well, which one's the best one? I'm going to naturally say ours. Having worked in the industry for several years, I found that these systems just work incredibly well. But as a person, as a consumer of assistive technology, you have a benefit of being able to choose lots of things. So my role as a local consultant is to help you consider ours in the best light possible and help you see if one is a good fit for you. Now, Talk to Me Technologies makes several different systems. I'm going to focus primarily on ones that folks with ALS might find most useful. What you see on the screen here is sort of a quick little splash from our website of the Zuvo 10, the Zuvo 12, the Zuvo 16, and the Zuvo 18. And they have the little suffix D afterwards, meaning they're the dedicated versions of the devices. The 10 is about a 10-inch diagonal, which is about the size of a typical iPad. The Zuvo 12 has a 12-inch diagonal screen. It's about the size of your typical laptop screen. The Zuvo 16 gets a bit wider with a 16-inch diagonal, but it's actually not any taller than the Zuvo 12. The Zuvo 18 is just fantastic. I'd like to say with a lot of love, it's the monster. It's really big and provides a very large screen for folks who need that kind of large screen, maybe because they have difficulty seeing, or they may have the device at a distance where it's easier to see small things on a larger screen. We're going to focus primarily on the 12 and the 16 because they're in the middle. They also seem to be the most popular. So the Zuvo 12, boy, it's really just about the size of this 8.5 by 11, slightly larger than this notebook I've got up in my hands here. And it's only about 2.25, 2.5 pounds. So it's meant to be large enough to use in a really functional way, but small enough and light enough to carry with you. And as a touchscreen device, it's ready to work just the way you're used to most tablets. It does not have a keyboard attached to it the way a laptop does. So you can use the touchscreen without having this other portion hanging on the bottom. It has these these flexible legs on the back so that you can tilt it at different angles to use on a desktop or a table. And it runs a program called Grid 3 that works with that grid program on iOS to provide vocabulary on the screen. Some of these pictures have a lot of picture symbols that we often set up with a system for kids or language learners to learn how to use. Um, and here on this screen, you'll see two versions of the Zuvo 12 when we add other selection method or accessories for access. So on the left, we have the Zuvo 12 with a head mouse nano or a Tracker Pro 2 head tracking systems. These two head tracking cameras actually just watch a reflective dot about the size of a hole punch that you'd wear on your head or on the bridge of your glasses to move the cursor around. And as I mentioned earlier with a headset head tracking system, it works with that one too. So if you're having difficulty using your hands, but you can move your head left and right, up and down, then you can move the cursor on the screen directly. And then just by hovering or holding still on a button, it'll select it for you automatically. The pictures on the right show the front and back of a Zuvo 12 with an iSpeak Inspo camera attached. So the camera in this bar is actually obscured in the middle of the bar, watches or looks at your eyes, and then as you point to different things on the screen, the cursor or highlight immediately moves to those items so that you can select just by holding your gaze still on the item on the screen that you want to select, and it will select for you automatically. It can also select by blinking. So as you point to an item on the screen and the highlight moves there, you can then just do an intentional blink and it'll select for you. Now, see if I can advance my slide to talk about the Zuvo 16. It's really similar, does all the things that the 12 does, but on a larger screen. And as I mentioned before, it's a brilliant screen. It's a brand new system for us. It's essentially just wider than the 12. The 18 is both taller and wider, so it takes up a lot of space in front of the person using it. But the 16 just gives you a little bit more space right in front of you. In the x-axis, the horizontal view that our eyes are better at moving in than up and down. So it's a fantastic alternative with a little bit more space on the screen. It does weigh about 5 pounds, so it may not be your first choice if you're still ambulatory, if you've been carrying a system around. But if you already tend to spend most of your time, say, using a wheelchair, this could be mounted in front of you, even close up so you could use your hands, and then further away with an eye tracking camera later. Now, you can see how, as I've been mentioning a couple times, the 16 is really not much taller than the 12. I've tried to scale these two images to see that the 16 and the 12 are almost identical in height. Now, when folks look at our systems and say want to compare them to another system offered by another company, there are several things that we do really well, I think. We're offering you a system like the Zuvo 12 or the Zuvo 16 that you need right now, or you may need soon, but not a lot of extra stuff that you don't necessarily need. So you can start off with the tablet and then add an alternative access as you need it later. We can work with most of these voice banking and message banking systems to allow you to have a system that's personalized with your own voice. We also, our systems can also control many set-top boxes and TVs so that if you have difficulty using those small remotes that you usually use, the speech device can probably do that for you. And these systems, when they're unlocked or undedicated, can then be able to be used to surf the web, do email, Facebook and Zoom, and other things that we're used to using a computer for. I didn't really mention it previously, but Medicare and insurances won't cover a device that works so well for everybody else in the world. They want it to be locked into just being a communication system. So a lot of those extra functions we use a computer for are locked out. But after we deliver the device, you can call our support team, and for a small one-time fee, we can unlock it so you can use all those other features that a computer can provide to you. Talk to Me Technologies, I think, really differentiates ourselves with the level of local assistance and support that we provide. And we want to make sure that when the device arrives, it's really working for you and ready to go. So we put a lot in the effort for pre-delivery customization. You provide the kind of vocabulary, the things you want to say with the device, the people you talk to or talk about, the things that are important for you. Provide that info to us ahead of time and we can program it onto the device for you so that you're not having to do that later. We provide a fantastic, what's that?
I was just gonna say, I just want to speak to that. For those listening or those who will listen later, that's something that we love about Talk to Me Technologies is, yeah, the support is just phenomenal in that way. That's the feedback we've heard from so many of our families who've used it, and just definitely speaks to you, Bruce. So, yeah, just want to be able to add that and kind of affirm that that is definitely a huge highlight here.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thanks, because it's really what we're all about. I didn't mention we were started by a speech language pathologist and his wife and his brother-in-law at a time when speech device companies were getting really big, and something was getting lost. And there's a real commitment at Talk to Me Technologies that we're all about supporting you, our clients, the people using our products, and their speech pathologists. And we don't want to lose sight of supporting you, because it's your success that really shows when we're successful. And all that work to customize the system before it lands in your hands makes a huge difference in the way you can pick it up and start being useful with it. We have this 3-year warranty that covers just about anything that can happen to the device. And after that 3 years, we can usually get any repairs covered through your insurance. Lifetime toll-free, US-based support, and also your local consultant here to help out in person when needed. And a PALS support program that I glossed over there, where we reach out to the person using the device for 6 months on a monthly basis to make sure that it's still being, is still working for you and help you make any changes that might be necessary. Our PALS support team works in the home office and will reach out by phone and email or a remote connection to the device. And they circle back to me to let me know how things are going with you, and make sure that I know when to reach out to you if you need some local support as well. Then we also work with most insurance companies and Medicare, and we're also adept at using Team Gleason and other supplemental sources like the California DDTP, or Deaf and Disabled Telephone Program, to help out when your insurance comes up short in covering these systems. Now, there are some scenarios that I thought about talking about really quickly. I think we're running a little short on time, but what do you think, Lindsay? Do you have another 10 minutes or so?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And I do want to check in, but maybe before we jump into David, just to see if you're having any questions, or if you've got the extra 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me? You can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sure.
I want to go through some more primitive kind of things that I want to ask you. I mean, you've been talking a lot of more high-end kind of stuff, but I'm interested in access. Like, let me tell you what I've done. I'm getting pretty good at Siri, so I'm listening to a lot of podcasts. I'm very interested in, obviously, audiobooks, but one thing about audiobooks like Cloud Library, which I have some books checked out, I can get there to get to the book, but I can't start the book up because Siri's not equalized with that service. And then if I get somebody to help me to get onto the book, then I can't turn the page without hitting the screen on my iPhone. So that's one thing. Another thing is I've been listening to books on YouTube. So because they scroll. So I can set up a scrolling system, like I'm reading Pride and Prejudice right now. And so it can scroll, and I can just push the space bar when I want it to stop. And I can also change the speed too. So those are things that I'm interested in. Another thing I'm interested in, which you mentioned, was the guy that you said use the head device to paint with, because I'm an illustrator and I'm still working 3 or 4 hours a day of drawing, but I'm very interested in using a head device in Adobe Photoshop. So,
I see.
so those are the things that I'm interested in. It's outside what you've been talking. Is that okay to ask?
Yeah, great thought. Dave, maybe I can, if you can tell me your email address, and then we could connect later for some more details. Yeah, I think it might be difficult to do anything. I haven't thought about it enough though, with the problem with your audiobooks on your phone, unless we can get a different kind of way for you to, like an alternative mouse connected to your phone that you can use. Because yeah,
Well,
I was
I've been used to working in Photoshop on
okay.
on my large iMac. So I'm interested in, can I still work in Photoshop with a head device?
Yeah, I don't see why not. It may be, of course, a little adjustment in your experience because moving your head is so different than moving your hands.
Yeah.
But yeah, a head mouse, because Adobe Photoshop is essentially using your mouse to use different tools on the screen.
Or a
Your head
stylus,
mouse is just
or
a
a
different tool.
stylus. I was using a stylus all the time.
Ah, I see. Yeah. So one thing is when you move your head with a head tracking mouse, it moves the cursor on the screen. But in
Right.
order to click or press and hold the mouse button, you'll probably want an alternative switch that maybe set up on maybe a headset boom so you can press with your mouth to hold down the mouse click to draw a line and then let go to stop drawing and so forth. Um, yeah, there are lots of lots of possibilities there, and hopefully I can point you to a couple things to look into.
Okay. And what about audiobooks then?
Yeah, good one. On your phone, that's going to be a little difficult to figure out um, unless we can plug in an alternative mouse. I think um, it sounds like you're able to hit the space bar on your computer keyboard to scroll in YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah, when I'm reading a book on YouTube and it scroll, I set it up to scroll, then I
I
can
see.
the space bar to pause.
Okay. And so that's different than listening to an audiobook on your phone.
Yeah, because on audiobook on the phone, I can get to the cloud library to see the book I want to read, but I can't start it up and then somebody starts it up for me. I can't turn the page without touching the screen.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Um,
I'm trying to get past these little stumbling blocks. And, you know, I talked to my son who's in technology and he says, well, they haven't coordinated Siri with Apple and Google and all that kind of stuff. Things are not coordinated enough. So
yeah, yeah, that's generally true. There may be a workaround. Um, so yeah, let's try to connect after today, and I can reach out to a sort of a brain trust of assistive technology professionals who might have some ideas. I need to get a little bit more specific information from you so I can present that snapshot to them and maybe get help you and your folks figure something out.
okay.
Okay. Um, so would you have a way to take down my email address to email me later?
Beginning of the presentation. So I'll send you a note so that you'll get my email and then we can connect that way, huh?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Great. And if in case, you know, it becomes difficult, I can also reach out to you guys and connect you via email too. So,
Okay.
but great questions, David, because I know even just, you know, reading and kind of that motion of scrolling or flipping the page is also something that, you know, many others have asked about. So that's a great question.
Well, Keith Miller is, what's the technology center that you talked about? Is for
Assistive Technology Center Lab.
yeah, they're closed for the summer. I mean, they're closed for, you know that? They've been closed for a couple of months.
Yeah, I have heard it's hard to get an appointment there right now.
Appointment. Keith Miller's helped me set up an appointment for, I don't know, a month from now or something like that, so I can see those devices, but I'd be very interested in being able to see if I can draw with one of those things on my head.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to try out. Yeah, they kind of let you, like loan out or even just try out some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bruce, for opening up a lot of things that I hadn't really thought about. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to help. Well, let me jump into these next couple of slides and maybe talk to them briefly, just so folks can, who might be viewing this recording later, will have them available. And we'll wrap it up. Now, besides asking, well, which device is the best, the question I get a lot is, well, which one's right for me? And well, ultimately, there's a two-way, there are many different ways folks can approach it. You can be slow and deliberative, or quick and impulsive. And I think it's always best to work with other folks who are familiar with this stuff to help consider a lot of options. It's okay to choose something that you can get right now, that's accessible right now to help out if you're having difficulty speaking or having difficulty being understood. But though it may be just what you need right now, don't stop there. Keep considering some other things too. As I mentioned previously, we all use multiple ways of communicating. So it's unlikely that one device will really fit all your needs and purposes. Low-tech methods work really well for people who have supportive and smart partners, family members and caregivers around them, because they usually require somebody to assist with co-construction and communication. The high-tech devices certainly can provide and support independent communication in person and even over the telephone and through things like email and text. Now, a speech language pathologist is probably the best medical professional to help out. There are a few now in the San Diego area that do augmentative and alternative communication, or are familiar with these speech devices and connect with us consultants to assist with looking at them. We're available to come out to your home to give you sort of product demonstrations and have you give a chance to try these out so you can get a sense of how they work and if one seems to fit your abilities and needs best. So see us consultants as a resource as well. Now, here are a couple different scenarios I'll go through fairly quickly. And of course, folks can always reach out to me on their own too. So in this scenario, for a person who says that my speech is okay, but I'm losing strength and control in my hands and my fingers.
Yeah, that's exactly where I am.
Yeah. You might, I think, start with voice banking and message banking. Now I'm thinking specifically in augmentative and alternative communication, but for you, David, certainly you want to look at alternatives for computer control or computer access, and maybe even something, hopefully to work with your phone as well, alternatives to using the touch screen since that's difficult. Oh yeah, and so that was my second bullet point. I'd forgotten, seek alternative access, especially a mouse type of gadget, because that can then give you access to other things on the screen that you use your fingers for. And certainly speech recognition might be useful, say on a Windows computer. So those are some things to think about in this kind of situation. Now, if you're experiencing that it's harder to speak or you're speaking slowly in order to keep being clear, and you're having difficulty with or losing your hand and arm control, this is a situation that certainly you want to start message banking as soon as possible, hopefully with some input from a speech pathologist so that you can go through that process with the best quality voice. And seek alternatives to your mouse control for PC or tablet. And I was just thinking, a speech synthesis, a voice amplifier that I didn't mention in these bullets might be helpful too. So you can still be clear without having to put as much effort into speaking loudly. And a speech pathologist can certainly be somebody you should connect with to get started with looking at high-tech AAC devices. Now, for a person who's in a situation where they can't talk, but they're still walking and can use their hands without much trouble, then I certainly want to look for a tablet app or borrow a speech device from the ALS Association so you have a way to communicate with speech with the people who may quickly misunderstand why you're not talking. And then get in touch with your speech pathologist to look at some options for a permanent speech system for you that could be covered through your insurance. Now, I've talked about a ton of different things here. You are part of the center of your team that can help with supporting you as you move forward with this experience. Certainly you are the center of it. You can be the leader, or you can recruit somebody to sort of spearhead this for you or be a partner with you. So your spouse and important family members are certainly a part of your inner circle. Your speech language pathologists, your occupational therapists, physical therapists, your neurologists are also, they're allied health professionals who can help you during this whole process. Certainly, especially when you're looking at getting stuff covered through insurance and getting the kind of assistance you need moving forward. Now, if you have work with a case manager, perhaps through your insurance or resource specialists at the ALS Association, those folks can be just so helpful because they have a range of experience and know of several resources that can help you out. And of course, as company consultants are here, we want to promote our products because that's our main role. But we're here to help you be successful and often have a range of experience with this kind of technology over several years to help out. So recruit, rely on, and bug us as much as you can so we can help you be successful. Now, here's a quick list of resources that includes several places to get assistive technology or find out more about it. The Ability Tools link at the first part is a California-based program. It's federal money given to states to disseminate information about assistive technology and link people to assistive technology to try it out through loan libraries and so forth. The NATADS, Assistive Technology Loan Centers, actually are connected through Ability Tools, but that second link is to the national program. California Reuse is an assistive technology reuse and recycling program that allows you to tap into a network of people who have equipment to borrow or to lend or actually gift to you that they're no longer using. So these top three tend to work all together. They're government agencies or local groups that all connect through these three websites. The next three links are for InfoGrip, a California-based company that sells assistive technology products out here. They're in Ventura. And AbleNet, which is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that have quite a range of products available. You can find some of them through Amazon for the same price, maybe slightly cheaper, maybe free shipping, but you may not be getting them from the original manufacturer. So it may be difficult when you buy an AbleNet switch from Amazon to know if you're getting the real thing or getting a reconditioned or repaired product. So you want to be careful about using Amazon. Broadened Horizons does some really neat adaptive gaming and computer access products with more of a customer customized focus that have some pretty neat stuff. Honestly, it's been about 6 months since I checked out their website to see what they're doing these days. And Team Gleason has just been a fantastic resource for a lot of folks with ALS these days. Steve Gleason and his team have lobbied Congress for changes in the way Medicare works and covers devices, and the resources of the foundation to provide support for folks who have limited means. It's been truly fantastic. Can't say enough good things about them. Now, certainly any further questions you have, I'd love to hear from you. My email address is here on the screen. It's simply bruce@talktometechnologies.com. And my phone number, 858-500-6586, comes to me right on the phone, on my cell phone here. So you can call or text me here. Good if you can remind me of how you heard about me or where you know me from so I can remember. And I do my best to return calls within 24 hours. There have been times when I haven't been able to reach folks back for another 24 hours, but I'll do my best. Text is certainly really quick, and email is good too, since it's always in front of me on my desktop. So that's what I prepared to talk about today. Thanks so much for paying attention and being a part of this.
Well, thank you.
Well, I just want to say before we kind of end here, and I know, we'll save some time too for you and David to talk more, but thank you so much, Bruce. Like, that was a phenomenal presentation, from just kind of looking at the wide variety of, like, all the way from low to high tech, and just, gosh, like, I just thought that was amazing. I definitely want to use it as a resource for any of our pals that are kind of, trying to figure out, especially those scenarios of which one's right for me, options for me. So yeah, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Okay, cool. That's
Yeah.
great. Glad to hear it. If you have any feedback for me of things I should have talked about, or questions that I didn't answer, I'll be glad to hear from you too.
Yeah.
I want to always make sure this is fresh and useful. I'm going to stop sharing at the moment.
Okay.